Hi, Nicholas Schreck. Great to have you back on the show again. This is your third time, I believe, joining us.
Hello there, Ken Eakins. It is indeed the third time, and hopefully three times will be a charm. As the old homily has it, we will see how charming we can be.
Excellent, excellent. So today we're not sort of looking at a specific book or a specific thing, but we're looking really more at a specific concept, well, a couple of concepts really today, and having more of a kind of conversation. Um, and we kind of wanted to look at the kind of idea of kind of modern conspiracy theory and also the left-hand path, because you have a quite a firm take on what the left-hand path is, and also
Mhm.
you seem to have been quite interested in conspiracy theories, especially of late.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I should say that in recent months, me and a few associates are concentrating right now on the sort of think tank aspect of a project called Oasis. And Oasis is a movement which I and others have founded around the world to counter what we see as one of the greatest threats to spiritual advancement, but also just to general intellectual development and a cancer in our society in general worldwide. And a number of us have come together who have been concerned about this threat. And what I'm referring to is the, obvious prevalence of what I would call not conspiracy theory, but conspiracy fantasy, unfounded, completely ridiculous, emotionally based propaganda narratives, usually informed by a very clear political partisan ideology, and yet pretending to be veiled to be secret information. And what I'm talking about is unfounded conspiracy fantasy. Am I saying that there are no conspiracies? Of course, there are conspiracies, but we need to get into that and approach that with critical reasoning and logic. So, unfortunately, a lot of these people who are infected with this kind of thinking, and I have compassion for them, actually. I don't see them as an enemy to be destroyed, but fellow human beings to be awakened from delusional thinking, which is being foisted on them by exploitative, manipulative forces. The very thing that they fear and hate is what is steering them into delusional and untrue thinking. So Oasis is a project that we are looking at this point. It is just a think tank. We are studying, where do these ideas come from? Who is spreading them? The old Latin question, qui bono, who benefits from the spreading of them? What are the historical roots of these things? They didn't just come spontaneously. Many of them have a built-in agenda, usually a political partisan one, either left-wing or right-wing, or for particular political individuals. So, yeah, so I have been looking at this for quite a long time. And I think an important thing is, out of personal experience, of course, as pretty much as soon as I began my public career with Radio Werewolf and in the 1980s, I became the target of the Satanic Panic immediately, even before that had a name. So I'm all too keenly aware of just how dangerous, how insane, and how completely detached from reality this kind of thinking can be. And Zena, my ex-wife, and I sort of thought that had been quelled, that the Satanic Panic had been ended, largely because of her doing, because of her very fierce public representation on television and the media, fighting it aggressively. She did an excellent job of defeating the Satanic Panic by saying, I am a real person, your accusations are lies, and I refute them. And over the years, since we have moved to Europe, particularly in the Anglo-American sphere, this kind of satanic-based conspiracy thinking has really become part of the mainstream, to the point of it's infected, the very heart of mainstream American politics, and it's infecting the whole Western world largely now. So I have to point out this comes from my own personal experience with this. I am daily a target of conspiracy thinking. I've been accused of absolute nonsense since I was in my 20s. So, it's personal to me. And I see how delusional it is. I mean, I know, and I happen to be in a position to have known many of the other people who are dragged into these conspiracy plots, so I can refute them.
Mm.
So that, as a general introduction, I just wanted to add that this is not just an intellectual abstract thing I'm considering. I consider it a real threat to society and even part of my spiritual teaching, because if at the heart of spiritual awareness is truth. And when you have this many millions of people caught up in untruth and aggressively supporting untruth, ironically calling themselves truthers and believing that they are discovering the real truth through their research. And in fact, they're just digging themselves deeper into a rabbit hole of delusions and lies and hallucinations that borders on psychosis, really. It now becomes necessary part of my spiritual work to fight that. So the first stage of that that's going on right now is trying to understand, where did this come from? What are the roots of it? What makes it tick? And then we will eventually get into how to diffuse it, and hopefully how to deprogram people into critical thinking, logic, reason, and rationality to approach these things from a sane and nonpartisan, objective perspective.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend recently, and we were talking about conspiracy thinking, or conspiracy delusion, whatever you want to call it. And one theory we came up with, of obviously there's many roots to these conspiracy theories, but one theory we came up with was, obviously the attendance at churches has started to decline quite heavily, and it really behooves Christianity to have conspiracy theorists, especially when there's a Satan figure involved. Um, and
Right.
it's interesting how much biblical talk starts to come into a lot of these theories, isn't it? It's
Yeah, well, I think that's absolutely true. And in the research that Oasis has done thus far, as I touched on a little bit in our earlier discussion, I think Christianity, I mean, what is Christianity? It is several different fragmented sects based on an ancient Middle Eastern spiritual tradition. Some of these versions of Christianity have nothing to do with each other. A lot of American evangelical movement that presents itself as Christianity has really nothing to do with the teaching of Jesus Christ as we know it, let alone if we get into the Gnostic teachings that we find in the Nag Hammadi documents. So yes, the fact is, the roots of almost all of this conspiracy fantasy propaganda narrative, which is how I try to very specifically define it, is rooted in the dualistic thinking of Abrahamic religion, that the good, there is a battle between absolute good and absolute evil. It requires the dehumanization of a demonic enemy that is completely sinister, evil, like a cliche, a caricature of the satanic.
mm,
Not that I in any way doubt that there is the satanic, but we can get into that. It is not what these people think it is. But absolutely, this is a distorted, declined, mutated version of evangelical Christianity. And underneath it, you always have that as a basic foundation, is this Abrahamic dualistic thinking, which is the opposite of genuine mysticism, which is non-dual. It is not based in this very simplistic cartoon idea of good versus evil. And the first thing I can say about that is, when people are faced with these conspiracy fantasies that they become completely obsessed with, you have to look and see, is the theory presenting the so-called malefactors in this as 100% evil monsters without, who are determined to kill off the human race? And, this kind of extreme malevolence, like a villain in a James Bond movie. If that is the case, then it's bullshit. And I find it shocking how rare it is for people to say, well, if you're completely dehumanizing the other side, then this is basically propaganda. And it is a uniquely American phenomenon, a strange amalgam of evangelical, apocalyptic, doomsday Christianity. Any day the devil is going to be pushing this huge plot that never quite happens. That is a hallmark of this kind of thinking. And we have really looked into it and studied it. Every day, people who are immersed in this kind of thinking and they're not exposed to any other are being bombarded with panic headlines. Tomorrow the globalists, you will not believe what the globalists are doing tomorrow. It's so hideous and so horrible, we can hardly even tell you. And just they're whipped into a constant state of fear, the equivalent, to get to your earlier statement, of a constant brimstone and fire sermon from an evangelical preacher. And it's all about panic, it's all about fear. It's not even any longer about a desire to have some particular kind of governance or political ideology. It's just sheer panic, and panic and fear blinds anyone. So even if you're interested in truth about these matters, fear and panic of the Alex Jones kind of hysteria is never a useful way to, or prism to look at these things.
Yeah, I think one of the things that kind of bolsters the conspiracy theorists, especially, is every now and then they're right. But it's like,
Right.
but if you take this, like, if you think of it as a pie, this is the way I always think about it. They every now and then they get a very thin slice of truth, don't they? And then for everyone, then all of a sudden the entire pie is real. And that's the way I kind of see
Right.
it. It's kind of that's yeah, it's mad.
Well, it is largely propaganda. If you look at the roots of it, and propaganda, the science of propaganda, and a strange thing is, like particularly since the Ukraine war and the COVID phenomena and the MAGA phenomenon, the Black Lives Matter phenomena, all of which created a hysterical, panicky narrative about all of them. People seem not to be really aware what propaganda is. This is a strange phenomena of our times. We know in World War I and World War II, both all sides spread complete lies, but propaganda only works if it, like, there are three kinds of propaganda. Black propaganda, which it basically is completely a lie. It's based on demonizing the enemy, you know. Gray propaganda includes some truth to it, and white propaganda comes right out and tells you we are against this enemy and here are our rational reasons why. It's not trying to trick you. But most of what is going on today is sheer black propaganda. People don't seem to be able to tell the difference between factual reporting and propaganda. So, but of course, propaganda and conspiracy thinking of this type only works if there's a grain of truth but it's really gotten to the point where that grain is tiny. Of course. Now, a strange phenomenon too that we have noticed in Oasis in studying this lately, maybe in the past year and a half, the principal proponents of this kind of thinking are so deluded that they've gotten to the point, and you may have noticed this yourself, where they're saying, isn't it funny? All of our conspiracy theories turned out to be right. So we're not conspiracy theories, that we're telling the truth. And our enemies were wrong. And even though there's absolutely no proof that that's true, this seems to be a new mutation of this kind of apocalyptic evangelical thinking, like we were totally right and the evil globalists or whoever, the Luciferian monster cabal that they think it is, was lying, and now they've been disproven. So this is actually quite disturbing, that they not only are terrified of this threat from this conspiracy, but they believe they have been proven right, and they actually are living in a cognitive confirmation bias nightmare where they think they have been proven right. I don't know if you've noticed that, but it's like a new arrogance with these people.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I've noticed one thing that it seems to have spread, like, in the past it was always a bit of a subculture, wasn't it? Conspiracy theory. It was like you're interested in UFOs and maybe the Bilderberg Group, or Bohemian Grove, and all these kind of like more esoteric kind of things. Whereas now it
Hmm.
seems to have spread. I'm thinking of a local guy. There's a guy down the road in the town next to the town I'm in. He's a YouTuber, and before he sort of got into all this stuff, he used to make videos of him walking around the British countryside, and it was kind of like meant to be like celebrating British countryside and walking, what we call rambling here.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and then he posted one video where it was him sort of making a commentary about a conspiracy thinker here in the UK, and it blew up. It went absolutely huge. Now he's got
What was the particular theory?
it was something to do with, oh god, what was it? I can't actually remember which one it was now. It's such a while ago now. What was it about? It was a post-COVID thing, so I think it was COVID related, but I
Hmm.
can't remember what the actual source was. But what was interesting about him is that he's an older, more what I'd consider like, I guess, middle class kind of, not someone that you would normally have associated with conspiracy theory. And you find that in America as well. If you look, you have housewives and the Karens or whatever you want to call them these days, and they're all conspiracy theorists. Like all of them believe
Yes,
this stuff.
it
Yeah.
is. I mean, I know because I am the target of this kind of thinking, and I see the kind of people they are. They are not raving lunatics. These are employed people who live in the real world, who are living now in an alternate reality where they think it is a folk religion. Let's call it
Mm.
what it is. It is a new 21st century folk religion that is larger than many, small alternative religions. It is certainly mainstream. It is not a subcultural niche. I mean, like, I'll give you a specific example, and I want to talk about it's easy to be vague and abstract about this, but I want to talk about real experiences. A very intelligent woman I know in California a few years ago called me panicky in Germany and said, Nicholas, can you check and tell me, has the Pope and the Italian prime minister been arrested just now in a pedophilia ring? Is that because in America they are hiding the news is not reporting it, but we gather that that's true. And I said, are you out of your mind? No.
Mm.
How do you really think that wouldn't be reported? So, and this is an intelligent person, uh, and I had to gently but firmly say, this is complete nonsense. Do you honestly think that the media, no matter how much we can't trust it or how corrupted by corporate interests it is, would not report a huge story like that? But she did. And that was a kind of turning point because this is an intelligent, educated person. And I thought, how in the fucking world are you thinking that that is a reality that we live in, that's something that huge? And I wanted to mention where I started really focusing on this, although in the 80s, of course, I battled it head on with the Satanic Panic, um, which now people are acting like, well, there might have been something to all that Satanic Panic. Now
Mm.
people are acting like, I guess all that was true. So a lot of the work we did to combat that was actually in vain because it's, like a cancer returning, it's come back. But I wanted to point out where I started really seeing how deeply entrenched this is. In 2012, I went back to America after being away from it, living in Germany since 1999. So this was deep into the Obama regime. And I went out into rural California to a certain area out there, and waitresses, clerks at shops, uh, associates of mine, people out in this rural part of California, they all shared a fear. This was December, November of 2012, that Obama was going to not ever leave office, number one, that he was going to establish martial law, that he was going to both institute Sharia law, because of course he is a secret Muslim, and at the same time make homosexuality mandatory. I don't know how a strict Muslim would be doing that, but that's a cognitive dissonance beyond my grasp. And they are then this Muslim homosexual cabal is then going to take all the guns away from Republicans. And they had proof positive that that FEMA, which is the emergency,
Response thing,
the organizational bureaucracy that deals with federal emergency issues, had stockpiled coffins in their area because they were going to start slaughtering Republicans in this takeover. Even now, the complete illogic, actually, Islamic fundamentalists would love Republicans. Their viewpoint is not particularly different because they both are coming from the extreme Abrahamic sin mentality. So, my mind was spinning at these were, again, not insane, drooling lunatics. These were functional, normal people. And they completely believed this as if I had entered an alternate universe where everyone agreed, you better watch out. If you go into the cities, they're going to start taking the guns away and killing Republicans, and and Sharia law will be instituted. And they believed it. Now, then, of course, none of those things happened. And yet, nobody ever said, oh, I guess we were lied to. I guess this was bullshit. And they just moved on to new explanations. Like,
that's what they
you're
do.
probably aware that the Jehovah's Witness keep saying the world's going to end on this date, and it doesn't end. So then they come up with reasons why, and they say there's a new date for the apocalypse. Well, that's a feature of this kind of thinking that is so illogical. You would think at some point these people would get angry and say, we have been lied to, we have been had, we are being tricked. But they never get angry at the people lying to them. They say, well, their heart was in the right place, and there must have been something to it, but the forces of good must somehow have defeated Obama's Islamic homosexual agenda. And then there's a new threat tomorrow, though. There's a new one, always a new, Medusa head rising for them to play whack-a-mole with. So that was what got me thinking, seeing, and this was before Trump. There was no MAGA movement, but I saw before, he was just the figurehead of something that already existed deeply in the American heartland, so to speak. So that's what got me thinking about it, was that moment.
It's interesting because I often think about this, like conspiracy theory and conspiracy thinking is kind of, it sort of fulfills the same function as religion, doesn't it? In some ways, like if something it kind of explains chaos. So if you're kind of a, if you're in a religion, like a Christianity sort of religion, something chaotic happens in the world. Well, it was God's will, God moves in mysterious ways. Whereas if that same thing happens to the conspiracy minded, well, that was clearly the Illuminati, or that was the deep state doing that. There's a boogeyman to blame the chaos on. So it kind of,
well, that's I would say real religion. I think this is important to make this clear. Religion itself, based on the mystical experience of reality, I mean, religion is a way to ultimately, in its most positive level, to clarify what reality is and to experience it without all these obscurations. Whatever spiritual tradition, that is the point of it. This kind of thinking is a distortion and a misuse of religion. I would not say that it's anti-religion. And to refer to the teachings of René Guénon, who was one of the founders of what is called traditionalism, this kind of thinking is counter-initiatory. It does not lead to enlightenment. It does not lead to liberation. It leads to fear. It leads to division. It leads to hatred. And all of these emotions obscure our ability to perceive truth. So I would say it's a caricature of religion. And in that way, I think what Oasis is starting to look at, there is a Gnostic aspect to these conspiracy thinking in that it is demiurgic. It is a false anti-religion that is forming, but a religion based on the kind of demiurgic emotions of hatred, of division, of not seeing the non-dual state of reality in a calm way, a transcendent way, but fearful, becoming a victim and feeling, it's basically paranoid schizophrenia turned into a religious faith, like seeing threats everywhere, and a martyr complex, like I am on the side of good, I'm on the side of the angels, and I'm fighting the evil cabal, whatever it may be. There, the Bilderberger Group, the Rothschilds, what is Stanley Kubrick, whatever it may be at that moment, the Illuminati, you know. So I would say it is anti-religion. I mean, this does not reflect the true thinking of actual esoteric Christianity. Even esoteric Christianity is not see itself as a victim. You know that this is a particular mutation and distortion of Abrahamic religion. But it always, and the other odd thing that I wanted to point out, like it was 50% of what we were going to talk about, is it's like you said, a lot of this is diluted Christianity in a political cult based on Christianity. But a lot of its informing ideas and philosophy comes from 19th century occultism, particularly theosophy. A lot of these ideas people don't realize are Blavatsky ideas. And you'd be amazed, I think, or maybe you realize how many of these conspiracy fantasists believe in Atlantis, Lemuria, that there were ancient, technologically advanced civilizations on Earth that, the current deep state and governments are hiding the proof of, ancient astronauts, the root races, this kind of thing. One thing I noticed in like my epiphany in California in 2012, when I encountered these people that so firmly believed there was going to be this, nightmarish Obama dictatorship coming to slaughter them, many of them also believed in this Anunnaki nonsense, this complete misunderstanding of Babylonian and Mesopotamian religion. And another part of it, I mean, it's so complex to really look at this. You may be aware of it. There is a strange anti-religious tone to this conspiracy thinking, because it basically condemns all religions as pedophiliac havens of secret satanic behavior. All of them, pretty much every mainstream religion, it dismisses as pedophiliac, which is its main accusation against everything. This obsession with child abuse.
That's because of Epstein, though, isn't it? That was one of the slices of the pie that turned out to be true. So they're
right,
leaning on that now. Yeah.
But that's a good example. Now, Epstein, completely irreligious, a nihilist, hedonist who believed absolutely nothing. He didn't have a political ideology, just a wealthy person who exploited his power to satiate his lust. There is, and it's interesting, there's an example of someone really doing what these people think all religions and but he was completely irreligious. He believed nothing. He wasn't part of a cult. He was just a nihilistic hedonist who had the means to pay people off to get away with his pedophilia crimes. And look at Hastert, the Republican who had abused, his male students. Nobody ever brings him up, these Republicans so it's very selective. They want their pedophilia to be secret. They want a pedophilia that people are getting away from because they claim the deep state is protecting them. But Epstein was in fact prosecuted by the state. Whatever mysterious way he died, the fact is, it isn't like the state approved of what he did and let him get away with it. He was convicted, and so is Ghislaine Maxwell. So if it's, but logic doesn't matter to these people. Roman Polanski is a fugitive from justice for raping one 13-year-old girl who has forgiven him even, and yet he is still a fugitive of justice. So, but this is logic. The judicial system and the police are seeking him as a criminal. So where is this elite that is allowed to get away with pedophilia? This is one of their main myths, is that somehow the government approves of, and the deep state or whatever layers of control they believe there are, approve of pedophilia and are encouraging it and are not convicting it, but child trafficking is a crime and it is being convicted all the time, and who's really doing that? People's parents, people's relatives, schools, priests. That's who's doing it, not satanic cults.
No, it's
Who's
interesting.
doing it is people's fathers and uncles.
I have a friend who's really deep into. He likes particularly to pick holes at the fact that I'm interested in the occult, and the occult is like the boogeyman, the convenient boogeyman
Right.
of conspiracy theory. And one of the theories that it was really big a couple of years ago was that Hillary Clinton and co were doing an Aleister Crowley ritual. That was the only
Right.
that was the only description, and were sucking the blood of children to get or using the blood of children to get something called endochrome, I think it's called, or some
No,
sort of
no. Well, this is something Oasis has researched, and we will
yeah
be issuing a report. Adrenochrome.
adrenochrome. That's
Yes,
it. Yeah.
this is pretty much all across the board with all these groups. They believe that they don't even know what occultism is, for
Mm.
one thing. They just say they use the word occult, and they believe occultism means killing, which goes back to,
Oh
the
yeah,
most ancient conspiracy theories and satanic beliefs
like the
into the Middle
Templars,
Ages.
even the
Yeah,
Templars.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
this has been going on forever. This is just a new, a new set decorating and dressing up of very old theories, the blood libel, you know, that's been going on forever. But the idea is that Hollywood celebrities are all occultists. Well, I've lived in Hollywood. Believe me, being a prominent occultist in Hollywood did not lead to people saying, oh, let us make you a star. On the contrary, it shut doors.
Mm.
Hollywood is nihilistic money worship. It's not, these people have no occult beliefs. They don't have any spiritual beliefs whatsoever.
Yeah.
None. So the idea is that the elite, and we have to get into that phrase, elite,
Oh
the
yeah.
elites,
That's a big
they
one.
call it now,
Yeah.
the elites are drinking the blood, using a worldwide, incredibly baroque, intricate, hidden system in which children are being harvested for adrenochrome that allows movie stars and rich celebrities and basically any liberal that Republicans don't like or that are considered to be globalists are drinking the blood of children and harvesting adrenochrome to remain immortal and all kinds of other
Well, what's
theories like
crazy
that.
is
But
they always used to attach. They'd say an Aleister Crowley ritual. So being someone who's part of the Thelemic current, I suppose you could say. This guy, my friend, he considers himself an expert, by the way, in these conspiracy theories. So I said, okay,
they always are. Yeah.
yeah. I said, okay, which Aleister Crowley ritual? And
Right.
he went, oh, it's it's just it's the main one. And I'd be like, well, which one?
Right.
There's a lot of
Right.
Aleister Crowley rituals.
The Gnostic Mass,
Yeah.
which,
Which
right.
it clearly doesn't have anything to do with harvesting the blood of children. It has technically, it has symbolically, it has children in it, but it doesn't.
Right.
Yeah, and it's like, well, if you're an expert and all these conspiracy theorists are experts, surely you'd be able to name the ritual. You'd be able to tell me some of
Right.
the details.
No,
Yeah,
they never can. They never can. Then they get back to just, well, do your own research. It's out there. Go find it.
yeah,
Whenever you confront these, I mean, you and I know what occultism is. We have experienced it. They're not really interested in the reality of it. They don't want to hear from you. They want to just push this vague disinformation, a ritual. Well, which one?
Mm.
You know, and well, maybe we should take a break from our discourse and ask some of these questions, because some of the questions that on my social media today, when we agreed to do this interview, I asked some of the people in my Facebook page and Instagram page to ask questions that address this confluence of occultism and conspiracy. So maybe you can ask some of those to me, and I'll answer them. And I think that really approaches some of the crucial key issues here.
yeah. So we've got one here. This is from an unnamed person on Instagram, but it says, "Let me get something straight here. You spent years saying you were part of an elitist organization full of strong people who rule the world. You later denounced the satanic philosophy. That doesn't mean you weren't necessarily dealing with powerful elitist people. However, now you say that a select elite governing the world is a conspiracy theory. In which instance were you lying, Mr. Shrek? In the 80s or now?"
Right. Right. Yeah. That comes from someone who obviously, and I told this person, he wrote to me privately. I said, well, I'll answer it publicly because it's a valid question. And and another reason why I'm very conscious of this whole conspiracy fantasy thinking, this particular interview that I did in 1988 with Tom Metzger has been taken out of context and quoted over and over and over hundreds of times by Christian evangelical groups. And they're assuming that when I speak of an elite, that, I mean, this is crazy based on my own history, that I must be some kind of globalist liberal, which I am very far from. I'm more conservative, more traditionalist. In fact, I'm a monarchist. I believe in tradition. I am deeply conservative in the true sense of the word. And these people, they have misinterpreted what I was saying in 1988 when I spoke of an elite. I still believe, yes, I'm talking about, like, we need a Platonic philosopher king ruling the world, not, but they think, they project what they think. Kanye West, they think I'm talking about Katy Perry or Hillary Clinton, people I have no respect for, never have even thought of. So they have taken my words out of context from this when I was, you know, operating the werewolf order, which had a ideological dimension to its magical work, and they're totally getting it wrong and assuming that the elite I was referring to, which meant a meritocracy of intellectual people who are like philosopher kings, that that's who should be ruling the world. I was not referring to what they think the elite is, you know, Schwab or Fauci, or these are not, that's not even remotely in my mind, pop culture figures that I despise more than anyone. And I think so. It's important to differentiate, but people will take whatever they take this terminology. I do believe there should be a ruling elite, as I'm assuming you as a Telemite would believe if you accept what the Book of the Law says. I'm not a Telemite, but if you take it on face value, that nor was Crowley when he spoke of an elite, referring to Katy Perry or Kanye West or whatever these idiots think the Illuminati is. So yes, I absolutely believe there should even be a theocratic elite of extremely intelligent, well-educated philosopher kings or queens ruling the world and deciding what happens.
Like
I don't even believe in democracy. I don't even believe that the average person should, especially today, misinformed as they are, should be deciding who should govern. So, that I just want to say it's a major misunderstanding. The elite I was talking about would have actually been more authoritarian than even they want it to be. So it's funny that, and only now things are so crazy that I'm accused of being a liberal and a Marxist when I have opposed liberalism and Marxism and Bolshevism, all my life very aggressively. But this 1984 Brave New World, mashup where words are not used properly. Like, people throw the words fascist and communist around without having any historical idea what they mean. It just means someone I don't like.
Mhm.
You know, the globalists that they hate are not Marxists in any way. They are capitalists.
Mm.
And a weird thing is, a lot of what these naive and gullible people seem to think are sinister plots is actually capitalism as we know it. You
Yeah.
know, like the word conspiracy is thrown around weirdly. Like, yeah, very powerful, wealthy people that run corporations have a lock on news, on information, on magazines, on newspapers, on the media. That's quite obvious, but that's not a conspiracy. That is capitalism, which most of these people approve of. So it's very ironic how wrong they get it.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you look at kind of the term elite, because it used to be, what was it before? It was globalists was the big one a few years ago, wasn't it? And then before that it was Illuminati, and then before that it would have been I don't know, the Masons maybe.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
a lot, most of this, and this is a point I really want to emphasize, and we'll be getting into when Oasis starts releasing documents to clarify these things. Most of these conspiracy thinking goes, you can find Catholic conspiracy theories about Freemasons that are exactly the same thing. Freemasons are secretly meeting. They want to create a one world government, a new world order, Novus Ordo Seclorum, that's on the dollar bill that these people are so frightened of, which is just a poetic phrase that the founding fathers used. Um, Most of it is just the anti-Freemasonic conspiracies jazzed up with new words. And globalist has become almost meaningless phrase that they use. They pit the nationalists against who are good against the globalists who are evil. And globalists, very frankly, is very often just a synonym for the evil Jews. Again, it's a polite, euphemistic way to refer to, the elders of Zion. That's what they mean by globalist, is the way that Stalin used the phrase rootless cosmopolitan to mean the Jews. So these are ancient, beliefs, and that it's just new. It's kind of like Scientology very much. There's a lot of similarities to the kitschy, almost campy science fiction thinking and L. Ron Hubbard's bizarre view of the world, in that they're just replacing the old conspiracy words, Freemasons, Jews, etc., Rosicrucians, with these new words, globalists and pedophiles. Is like, and what does that even mean? Who are we talking about exactly? It's very vague,
When
you
did
know.
when did conspiracy theory? I've asked this on the show a few times actually of different guests. I think conspiracy theorists went truly dark, as in before that it was more of a fun subculture. As I was saying, the X-Files era, it was more of a, generally speaking, it was a fun subculture that blended into the
Right,
UFO.
right.
And it was it was more high strangeness, whereas I think after 9/11 is where it started to really
Yeah,
become a lot darker. And what was
yeah,
interesting was also conspiracy theory really felt like more of a left wing movement originally. It felt very left centric,
absolutely.
and now it's completely flipped to the right, and it's really interesting. Like if you're a conspiracy theorist, you're immediately tagged by the left as a right winger. You're
Right. I mean, of course, the left has all kinds of conspiracy theories, and I want to make that very clear. I am absolutely not committed to any partisan political party. One of the worst things about opposing this conspiracy fantasy thinking is if you say this whole cluster of ideas is not true, then they automatically say, oh, well, then you must be on the other side. You are a globalist. Oh, if you think Trump is a blithering idiot, which I do, let me say that loudly and clearly in case anyone doubts it. He is a blithering idiot. He always has been before he entered politics. He always will be. He's a moron. He's just a moron. And I'm not obsessed with him. He's not taking space in my head, as they say, but he's just a blithering, ignorant moron. Then they think, oh, then you must love Biden or you must love Hillary Clinton. No, I have never voted for anyone in my life. I don't even believe in America or the founding fathers or the Constitution or any of it at all. So I reject the whole system. But this is an insoluble aspect that I know you can't solve. If you say these particular groups of conspiracy theories that you happen to like because they appeal to your emotions and your political feelings, if I think they're bullshit, then I must support the other side. No, I don't support either. And to get to your point about, yes, originally, like let's take Mae Brussell, who I'm sure you know who she was. And Mae Brussell's ideas are not different. She basically saying there was a deep state, though she used another word, and they have omnipotent control over the media, over everything, and that they have an agenda, and that they're super efficient and able to shift societal thinking. And yet she was coming from a very left-wing point of view. And to a certain degree, Marxism is a leftist conspiracy theory. That, Das Kapital, the ideas of Karl Marx are a conspiracy theory. And however, one that has been accepted and adopted by world governments like the Soviet Union or Cuba or Vietnam or China. But that's a left-wing conspiracy theory. This is the way reality is. The evil capitalists are doing this. The proletariat are the good. They will fight the evil capitalists. And it's even a God-given Hegelian destiny that Marxism will be the only ideology. It is completely a conspiracy theory. So, right-wingers that think we're only attacking the right, Marxism is a conspiracy theory. The Frankfurt School that really did try to push Marxist thinking into academia, that's a left-wing conspiracy. So yeah, it's interesting. Let's take a real conspiracy. I think it's important to say there are conspiracies. This is another straw man argument that these conspiracy theorists will do. They'll say, oh, well, are you saying there never were any conspiracies? Of course there were. Criminals conspire to hide their crimes. Politicians and emperors and kings and queens have always conspired to hide the things they're doing, but eventually somebody squeals. Eventually you find out there was a conspiracy to kill Julius Caesar. We found out who did that conspiracy. They're limited. Of course, when somebody conspires to commit a crime, it's a conspiracy. But eventually we find out. And let's take the JFK murder. There is no doubt in my mind there was a conspiracy in the true sense of the word to kill John F. Kennedy. However, if the deep state is so powerful, I and many other researchers and scholars, you can discover basically what happened. We don't have every name and every date in detail, but you can put together basically what happened. It was a conspiracy, and we know who conspired. We know their names who conspired to hide the conspiracy. But it wasn't an omnipotent, all-powerful conspiracy, nor the assassination of Bobby Kennedy or Martin Luther King or many others. So there are real conspiracies, but the fact is we usually find out what they were about. And this is maybe the core issue, and I think you would agree. A friend of mine, the musician Ethan Gold, who I have discussed this with, was saying, have these people ever met people? Have they ever met how incompetent most human beings are? Have you, in an office, could you hide who's having an affair? Can you hide who's stealing money from the till? In any, like in a band, could you get 4 people to agree on even doing a song the same way, let alone hide, vast Spectre-like, Blofeld-like plots and plans? Where do they think there are these incredibly efficient human beings who are capable of maintaining secrets for centuries about aliens and adrenochrome?
When I spoke to John Ronson about this on this show, I think it was on the show, but he said that at the time 9/11, because this is 2008, I think I spoke to him about this. When you think about the conspiracy theory of 9/11, one of them is that the planes were landed beforehand and all the passengers were executed and etc. It's like, which human being is going to do that? Which set of human beings is going to line up a bunch of innocent people against the wall in America and shoot them to death?
Right.
And secondary, how the hell are they going to keep that secret? Because the amount of people must be involved for that to happen,
right?
Like you say,
right.
is staggering. So it's unfathomable. Yeah, it drives me insane.
Well, we drive ourselves crazy when we go into the details of these things. It's a total lack of critical thinking, number one. Secondly, a failure to understand human nature. People are not efficient. Have these people ever met anyone in the CIA? The CIA is a slipshod, inefficient organization that has failed again and again and again. It couldn't even figure out that the Soviet Union was falling apart when it was, totally taken by surprise. We know what CIA involvement was in the Kennedy assassination because they were sloppy, because they were dealing with the mafia. They weren't dealing with secret societies or aliens. They were just dealing with grubby everyday, powerful people who had a political agenda. So this is the core thing. And the most frightening thing about the world is not that these evil cabals are conspiring to do these sinister things. I would say more frightening, nobody is in charge. Nobody. It would be great if we had a secret society of super efficient people who are able to arrange any damn thing. The reason our society's falling apart, there's no leadership. It's rudderless. It's chaos. There's nobody at the wheel, and we're headed over a cliff. It would be great if somebody took control, but there is, the Illuminati, was the historical phenomenon, was a little tiny Bavarian group that had no power ever, but that this is the thing. Who looks at the world? For instance, let's take Biden, who is like now that Obama's gone, or Clinton, the arch enemy of these people who see him as the ultimate communist globalist imposing this dictatorship. Why, if the Democratic Party was this powerful cabal of pedophile Satanists, that have, occult mind control powers, why would they pick this bumbling, senile guy who can hardly give a speech properly, who failed in Afghanistan dismally? What was their plot there? But they'll come up with a reason. Why would they not have a super charismatic young antichrist figure who would enchant the whole world? What? Obviously, this is a political miscalculation. Why would they pick this person of all people to be their spearhead and figurehead? But is that just logical? And yet there are some people that actually believe Trump is the actual real president of the United States, and that the Biden administration is some kind of fake TV show that's being filmed at an alternate White House to reveal to the people, the corruption. It's completely illogical.
To be fair, I think Trump still believes he's the real president of the United States
Well,
as well.
well, that gets into mental illness and a lack. And I'm not being jocular or facetious. This is clearly a deeply narcissistic, wounded person with extreme self-esteem problems. And at the heart of a lot of the conspiracy thinking is this alpha male concept. And somebody pointed out, I don't know who, I wish I could credit them, Trump is a weak man's idea of a strong man. He is clear. I mean, these people whine about snowflakes. There's nobody who whines and bitches and complains and grumbles in the most petty way than this person. There's nothing heroic about him. He doesn't even live up to his crimes. He, unlike Hitler or Mussolini, he didn't say, yes, we are having a coup d'etat against the state. He said, no, well, we're not really doing that. He's always modifying and, no, you got me wrong. He doesn't even have the strength of his conviction, and he betrays his own followers. He's not worthy of respect on any level. No. But a lot of this thinking is this alpha male thinking. A lot of it is hatred of women and support of what is believed to be an alpha male, which is a totally debunked concept. There is no such thing in nature. That's been even debunked by the person who even came up with the idea of alpha male.
Oh yeah, it was the ultimate fallacy of that was that the study that apparently it's all based on the alpha beta sigma male, whatever. It was all based on like wolves in captivity, and I think they all believed it was like wolves in the wild, and that represents like these wolves represent the stages of masculinity, and
right.
But they're in captivity, so you're basing your astrology for incels on kind of a flawed data model in the first place.
Well, this thing about the alpha male, which is central to these people's belief that that there is a deliberate program of emasculation going on against males. This gets to the heart of the left-hand path, and why I say that a misunderstanding of the left-hand path, which is feminine wisdom. In the true left-hand path, in the authentic left-hand path, The feminine is seen as the strong, the powerful. Kali, for instance, the goddess, who, and this is typical, Jordan Peterson, who's the very epitome of this kind of stupidity, this sophomoric pseudo intellectuality, this moron who has read a little Jung and a little bit of Campbell, and people who've never read a book think he's a fucking genius. Um, he personally like attacked the goddess Kali as representing feminism. This is this is how warped their idea is, that there's attack on maleness, by an evil feminine force. So that's also a crucial part of it, the misunderstanding of the left-hand path being about feminine wisdom
Mm.
and strength and the goddess, but it's not feminism. It's not what they think it is.
No.
So this is really a very warping and distorting part of the problem we're dealing with.
Just going back very briefly to why do you think? 'Cause I have a friend that has been on this show recently, and he often looks at what he considers to be, and this is a big part of conspiracy theory that I don't think gets discussed from people that aren't conspiracy theories very that often, which is that there seems to be this belief that big media groups and large corporations and companies
The lame stream media, which you must always follow. Yeah.
And the sheeple, that's the other one, isn't it? But the
Yes.
they're part of their belief is that these companies and these big huge media entities are all signaling each other using kind of occult symbols and occult the famous one is when they do this, or
Right. Well, if I do this, it will be used as proof of my occultism.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
It is interesting, but why do you think? The thing I don't get is why would they do it? Why would they need to telegraph to each other like that? This is
right.
It's like, surely, if they're a big cabal, they can just talk to each other.
Let's focus on that for a moment. That's a very important part of what Oasis has been researching. This idiotic idea that huge media conglomerates and pop stars and movie stars, and there's a lot of hatred of just wealthy, attractive people that can get laid, basically. A lot of it just comes down to something that simple. They must be Satanists because they are rich, they can have sex, they have money, therefore they must be evil pedophiles who are taking blood from children. This idea that let's say there were secret societies, which there have been, by the way. Nobody's denying that in history there are not the Tongs, the Cosa Nostra, secret societies exist, the Tula Gesellschaft. There are secret societies that plot things in private and then do them. Do they advertise what they're doing through the media? No, they do not. Do they send signals through novels, movies, pop songs, TV shows? This is one of the most bizarre misconceptions in this conspiracy fantasy, the very thing you're bringing up, that they make hand gestures and symbols to, and so that every idiot with a blog can understand the conspiracy that is being perpetuated
why
on
would
them.
you give it away, especially in the age of the internet, where every occult symbol is a few clicks away? Surely why would you put it out there? It just doesn't make sense.
The idea that these incredibly banal people like Hillary Clinton or Fauci or Podesta are occultists, also occultists are out in the open now. There's plenty of people who are. If they were, why wouldn't they be pushing a genuine occultist agenda? It's completely nonsensical. But this is one of the stupidest ideas of all, that what secret societies and all these sinister cabals do is announce what they're doing through the media to let millions of people know it. And why wouldn't they stop doing it? Because if every idiot with a blog about conspiracy can interpret and decipher these symbols, what possible use is for them to continue to do it? It's like Stanley Kubrick is a big part of this conspiracy thinking. The idea that he let people know through messages in The Shining that he faked the moon landing after doing 2001. So he then wanted to let people know through secret symbolism in his 1980 film, The Shining, you know, or Eyes Wide Shut, his last film. There's a whole cult of people who think, that revealed really what this pedophile satanic society is really like. And if you study it, there are clues to it. That this is a big idea that pop stars, directors, movie stars are revealing the secret plan. And I have been accused of it too. Like these interviews that I gave in the 80s are consistently cited. That's why I used it in my song They in 2020. I have myself playing a conspiracy theorist researching myself. There's this idiotic use of my quotations from the 80s as if I announced the plan for the New World Order, and then these people, then like people like Kanye West and George Bush, by the way, who watched my interview, The First Family of Satanism, at the Religious Broadcasting Convention, and was completely behind the Satanic Panic. He loved the Satanic Panic. He and the Reagan administration supported it. And yet these people think George Bush was part of the New World Order, part of the Satanic Society. I know firsthand that's not true. So I think, again, we should get to some of the questions that were asked again. Maybe we should finish those up.
We'll do that, but I just want to kind of clarify a point that I've always had where with this sort of occult symbology in the mainstream. It's just it just looks cool. I think that's kind of what it is. It's artists are inspired by the occult often because it has a good aesthetic to it. It's I'm a filmmaker. I often put occult stuff in my my films because it adds a layer of of something to it, an aesthetic layer that people resonate with, and that's what it is, really. I mean, the way I see it, anyway, that's what it is. But
I mean, my book, The Satanic Screen, goes into detail. What is the real correlation between cinema and true occultism? Very little. In fact, it's the other way around. Most of what these people's ideas of what occultism is comes from some Hollywood screenwriters' completely fictional nonsense. It's not rooted in anything real. This idea that Hollywood and Los Angeles is a hotbed of serious occultism and ceremonial magic is absolutely not true. Anyone who lives there for any amount of time would know that. I mean, like, you take a real occultist like Kenneth Anger, why wouldn't he have been greeted and given billion-dollar budgets instead of starving, making 20-minute amateur films, basically? Why, people who are actually interested in occultism have not been rewarded by Hollywood whatsoever, but they'll have a reason for that too. There's always an excuse.
Let's look at a question from Facebook. I like this one from Red Moon Rising. It's like, how much disinformation is full knowingly dipped like poison into the well to provoke shock and awe, ignorance and compliance, or are all such actors thus engaged merely puppets of a greater archonic purpose to divide seekers from truth?
Right. Well, as I told her, that's a very pertinent question. The thing is, I can't give you an exact percentage, but what we are looking at in Oasis, how much of this conspiracy theory thinking is pushed by political actors as a kind of non-political propaganda that makes people think, well, this isn't really coming from a political party. A lot of it is very clever propaganda, and it is indeed, Putin is the master of it. Putin doesn't have a good army, as we can see. He doesn't have the technical and technological resources to create his neo-Russian empire that he wants to create. But he did master the idea that Americans are very uneducated, and your own people are Anglo-American cousinhood. Brexit absolutely was very much pushed by Russian propaganda, and I'm sure you know that, in the British media. I mean, Putin put a lot of energy into his overall scheme of, on the chessboard of Europe, removing England from Europe was a very important goal to him. So, first of all, there are specific political players pushing these conspiracy ideas. but they're not revealing that they're coming from there. In fact, they pretend to be from ordinary people. But a lot of it is sheerly fake. That's one thing. I know that the Trump campaign and people connected to the Trump campaign generate conspiracy theories, but they don't announce on it this is a Trump political campaign. They put it here, they put it there, they put little Easter eggs with these political ideas hidden in them, like a Trojan horse. So they seem neutral. But I mean, I think to answer her question, a lot of this is deliberate disinformation. The internet has become a great playground for political propagandists to push demonization of the enemy without coming right out, and you don't have to say it. You can spread a rumor to destroy someone's reputation and career, and that's really what's happening.
That's kind of, I mean, that's QAnon, isn't it, really? I mean, QAnon's
Yeah,
the ultimate version of that. I've never seen something like QAnon before with an
right.
actual a figurehead, like Trump. That was the strangest thing, because in the past, like you said, conspiracy theorists would attack leaders. They would attack these kind of like George Bush was a great example,
Right,
because Alex
right,
Jones was there protesting George Bush. Now he's backing the prime minister, well, the president. I keep saying prime minister. Sorry, I'm British.
right, right.
But it's
We had a
very,
we had a revolution. We kicked you out. That we
I
don't
know.
have a pump.
But yeah,
I was on the side of the redcoats, though. I think it was a bad idea. So.
well, we were fighting the Spanish at the time as well, but
Right.
but yeah, no, but it is fascinating that QAnon had this kind of figurehead, this kind of this king. It was that's a new thing. I think I've not seen that in any other conspiracy.
Yeah, I mean, we could go on for 15 hours analyzing this thing, but like Oasis is trying to analyze what are the different pillars of this, and this is, as you say, a very unique aspect of this wave of conspiracy fantasy. The interesting thing, I don't want to generalize, but the average conspiracy fantasist who pushes these particular cluster of ideas, they believe that they are nonconformists who are rebelling against the government and against the elite, but they believe that a inherited millionaire who is deeply entrenched in the media, was basically a reality TV star, part of New York society, just exactly like Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, comes from the same social world as Epstein. How many pictures of Ghislaine Maxwell and Trump, are together, and he even wished her well. He is the epitome of the wealthy elite. These people are very largely veiled anti-Semitic people who look at globalism, and yet the Trump empire is global. Most of his lawyers and even his family are Jewish. What? So how are they seeing him as this? If all of those things are what represent the evil elite for them, how do they see him as the outlier, the rebel? What a brilliant PR job he's done. He is the elite saying we're fighting the elite, you
Yeah.
know. And this deep state idea, like, yes, I'm the president of the United States, which is still the most powerful person in the world, and yet I'm a victim. The deep state is not letting me govern properly. This it's an unwinnable battle because it's completely illogical. But how is he not representing the elite?
Well,
How
they'll
are the
say
Kushners? How are the
they'll,
Kushners not the elite?
they'll say that he's their man on the inside, though, won't they? He's the he's an elitist, but he's there representing.
Well,
He's
but
putting.
but it's not only Trump, but like I've seen people who you would think are alternative kind of people who are rebels against the government, who once would have wanted nothing to do with politicians or government, like revering, mainstream politicians like Mitch McConnell, totally boring and uncharismatic non-entities. It's very strange. I mean, they are not in any way opposing anything. They are supporting conventional politicians who just use rhetoric to get fear going so that they get elected. So they're not really rebels at all. They are supporting the political system as it is. And of course, they want to clear the swamp but it is the swamp. They are supporting the very swamp they want to clear.
So going to the left-hand path, and obviously, it
Well,
feels.
I want to answer the second part of her
Oh yeah, yeah.
question. The yes, a lot of this is not spontaneous. Uh, the people speaking. That's the way it's interpreted. That it's the spontaneous voice of the people. A lot of it is manipulated by political players, and there are even, we can even name, there are organizations that are hired to flood the internet with bullshit about certain topics, and then like an infection, once it catches on, like a rumor, a false rumor, it becomes repeated as truth till you no longer can trace where it comes from. So that is a big part of it. And then the second part of the question is the spiritual aspect of this, where she said, if you could read the last part of that again.
Uh, or are all such actors thus engaged merely puppets of a greater archontic purpose to divide seekers from truth?
Right. So this gets into the spiritual and metaphysical dimension. I do believe that these conspiracy theory mania is, you could say, part of what Gnostics would refer to as the demiurgic problem in our world. The demiurge, which is the imposter god, the malevolent imposter god that people name Yahweh, Allah, Jehovah, but is really Ialdabaoth, the demiurge. This pushing a fake truth and claiming this is, we are seeking the truth, and yet being totally absorbed in delusion and psychotic fantasy. That is the very essence of the demiurge. So there is a metaphysical aspect to it, and that gets into what I was referring to before, the Guinonian concept of counter initiation. How much of this occult conspiracy thinking is rooted in theosophy, in the Order of the Golden Dawn, in 19th century concepts of occultism? You may be aware of Nesta Webster, this English woman who wrote a very influential book about secret societies. Most of her ideas are just being redressed and repackaged. A lot of these Christian ideas of evil conspiracy go back to occultists like theosophy. A lot of it is just repackaged and rehashed 19th century occultism.
And often Blavatsky was wrong. I mean, she brought
Oh,
back
horribly
incorrect.
wrong. But Blavatsky was a con woman who just made up nonsense off the top of her head and presented it at a time when it was difficult to research these things as she's a plagiarist, and the secret doctrine is complete mishmash of stolen nonsense. So you've got people who don't have critical thinking, don't understand history, and their roots are, conmanship and bullshit from, and that's why I say a lot of it reminds me of Scientology. It's just sheer nonsense.
Yeah. Should we answer Don Burden's question as well?
Yeah.
From Facebook. He said, are there any conspiracies you do believe in? Like maybe the dumbing down of public school curriculums or the emphasis on gender confusion in the name of affirmation. I'm not saying these conspiracies exist, but they're both things I've heard many people talk about lately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As I said earlier, I think it's important we are fighting lies. We are fighting disinformation. And the fact is, if you put all your energy into the rabbit hole of fake conspiracies that don't even exist, you're going to miss the real ones. Governments are conspiring to hide their crimes, to hide what's really happening. That is the nature of governments. All governments, every single one, left wing, right wing, middle of the road, all politicians conspire to make themselves look good and to hide their failures. Criminals are deeply entrenched in the legal system and the political system to exercise power. Those are the real crimes. I mean, are there real conspiracies? As I said, a conspiracy to hide the truth about the assassination of John F. Kennedy, I have no doubt about it. But I can tell you it was just human motives of political power. It wasn't reptile people. It wasn't aliens. It wasn't, it's just the dynamics of power as has always been played on the political stage. So, there are hundreds of conspiracies. There was a CIA conspiracy in Chile that removed a legal government. There was a CIA conspiracy in Iran to remove the legally elected head of Iran because he
and
wanted to
Cuba.
go against, yeah, against British oil. You know, these are real conspiracies, but they're boring to these people. There's no Satanism involved. There's no aliens. There's no, there's no occult anything to it. It's just like mafia brutality on the political level.
Yeah.
So, so yes, there do powerful people, if they have the means and the lack of ethics to hide the truth about themselves, do they do that? Of course they do. But let's be realistic. And if these people who put all their energy into, revealing fake conspiracies that never even happened, if they're really serious about these issues, let's unite to reveal the true conspiracies instead of the fake ones. There's nothing wrong with being a researcher into conspiracies. I am an investigative journalist I have proven several conspiracies happen, but they're just not on the level of super efficiency, of Spectre-like, Fu Manchu-like total control. That actually is an obscuration, and it actually becomes a distraction from the real conspiracy theories.
Well,
That's my
about this. We've spoken about this in
yeah.
the past in Facebook messages. It feels like everyone's being pushed into these little macro kind of activist states, aren't they? On both the right and the left, where and it feels like everyone's focusing all their energy on these smaller issues, and in the background, this huge corporate behemoth is just plowing through the world. And I don't know. I come very much from a Baudrillard and kind of William Gibson perspective, where I've always got my eye on corporations and the way that corporations are slowly taking over, and it's really
Let me underscore what I said before. If these people who are they're uneducated people who have never learned how to use critical thinking. They don't know how to, quote, do their own research because they don't know how to determine what is factual and what is not. They don't know how historians work to prove what likely happened and what didn't happen. They don't have these tools. The problem with that is that they're projecting fantasies into what can actually be proven. Let's look at the names of the people who are running the huge mega corporations that own every damn thing. If they're concerned with media, this is another bizarre thing, like thinking that Trump is a millionaire celebrity is not part of the elite. They act like there's only the liberal media, like there's only CNN and NBC and the liberal media. But Murdoch's empire is gigantic and has huge influence and is a kingmaker, but they act like he's some kind of like plucky rebel. But that is just as much the lamestream media. This is one of the pretenses. It's kind of like when punk rock went mainstream and got signed to major record companies. You can't be punk rock anymore, And it's kind of like a rock and roll mentality to the current right wing, like we're rebels, we're nonconformists, but actually they're supporting extremely entrenched elite power structures that are corporate. And I'll repeat it again. The only conspiracy really going on is capitalism, hyper capitalism, corporations controlling everything, absolutely everything. Facebook, X, worry about Musk, but to them he's a rebel hero. So this, look at capitalism and look at corporations. We can find out their names. They are not secret societies. We can know who are running these corporations. That's the real problem.
The shadowy shareholders. That's the only thing. I suppose that'll be the next thing probably. But no, I think we should move on because obviously time's ticking as well.
Yeah.
So one thing I just want to define when it comes to the left-hand path. Obviously, I think when you talk about it, you're talking about it from a very traditional, the origins of the left-hand path. But why do you think it's changed so much now? Why is the kind of occult?
Well, I would counter that whole perspective. There is It doesn't have any, there's no mutation. The left-hand path is a phrase that comes from Indian mysticism, either Tantric Buddhism, Tantric Vedic tradition, or even Jainism, a lesser known Indian religion. I would deny that these new definitions that have been, as I said in my recent lecture, which I gave in Leipzig at the Wave Gothic Treffen, Madame Blavatsky, the Order of the Golden Dawn, Crowley, basically didn't understand tantric idea of what the left-hand path means, which is Tantra. That's what the left-hand path is. It is the tantric tradition, not neo-tantra, but the genuine, authentic spiritual lineage. And what Blavatsky misunderstood it, Crowley took it from her, the Golden Dawn took it from Blavatsky, and then that 19th century group of European and English occultists took the left-hand path phrase, totally distorted it, and then LaVey and Aquino and their imitators, in a very simplistic, childish way, said, oh, if Blavatsky and Crowley and the Golden Dawn say the left-hand path is evil, then I am evil. I will embrace. But that's, again, a total misunderstanding of what it means. So to me, as something else I pointed out, like Lucifer, it is a problem of translation. It is a problem of not understanding what the thing means. So yes, in general, it's like I was saying before about fascism and communism. Left-wing people that call Trump or Boris Johnson fascist, they are not fascists. They are capitalist plutocrats. They are in no way fascists, not even remotely. And, right-wing people who call Biden or other liberal leaders who are actually, in fact, quite conservative, communists and Marxists is nonsense. I would say the left-hand path phrase is used by Satanists and occultists in such a wrong way as to be vacated of all meaning, in the same way that fascist and communist is just used to mean whatever I don't like. The right-hand path and the left-hand path are two paths that lead to the same goal, which is liberation. They're different methods. They are not enemies of each other. It isn't like the right-hand path is about conformism and submission to a god. In fact, the real left-hand path is total submission and submergence to Shakti, or to the female wisdom. I mean, I could go on, and I have gone on, and I will continue to battle this misimpression. So I don't buy that there could be a new definition of the left-hand path. I understand some people do, but Crowley, had a big influence on that in his definitions of the left-hand path, about the Black Brothers and that sort of thing. And it sort of trickled into the general occult community. But the left-hand path never was associated with individualism, black magic, Satanism. It never, that it's just bogus. That's fake folk etymology.
We could talk about this it's one of these sort of subjects we could just talk about for hours and hours. Maybe we should talk about it again and have another show about it as well. But so let us know what you're up to in terms of output, like books, music, etc.
Right. Well, I've never been a political person or any kind of I've never expressed any particular ideology, and when I have, it has been on a spiritual basis. So I'm definitely going out on a limb by saying this conspiracy thinking has to be confronted, it has to be attacked, it has to be debunked. It is an impediment to spiritual progress. Unlike what these people think, it is a major obstacle to initiatory work. And if you are infected with it, it's going to be a problem that's going to stop you from becoming enlightened, because it counters non-dualism and becomes so childishly simplistic and dualistic and centered on good versus evil, it makes you stupid. So that is why one of the things that I've been doing is this formation of Oasis, which at this point is a think tank to study what are the causes and conditions of this mental infection And eventually we will get into, well, how can people be deprogrammed and freed and countered and live in reality again? So that's one thing. During the pandemic, as I mentioned in the 3 interviews we've done thus far, all of my major literary works have been revamped, expanded, and put into a final version. So the Manson File, Myth and Reality of an Outlaw Shaman, came out finally in 2022 after many obstacles because of the COVID lockdown. So that the final edition of that has been printed last year in May of 2022. The Satanic Screen is being reprinted at this very moment in a British version will come out on Head Press, a French version, an Italian version, a Spanish version. My book, Flowers from Hell, a new deluxe, beautiful English version is being printed in South America at this moment. So this is work that's been going on during the whole pandemic period. So my whole literary collected works, with the exception of Demons of the Flesh, which I know people want, are all coming out. Are coming out in new versions. I'm working on several novels, one of which will be released in November of this year. On my Bandcamp, you can find all of the albums that I've released since 2019. And when I was in Sweden just now, in Stockholm last week, I gave a lecture on Abraxas, the Gnostic deity, and that will be my next book to come out, on Anya Publishing in America and Edition Pansof in France, Manus Sinistra, Spanish-speaking, and there will be other versions of it. So that will be a thoroughgoing study of Abraxas and his connection to Gnosticism, to culture, to literature, to music, a definitive volume on this mysterious deity, Abraxas. And at the same event in Stockholm last week, I also premiered 2 new songs that are a very different musical direction that I'm taking that will come out on a EP called Destroy, She Said. And I've given you one of them to play. You can premiere it on your show, and it is called The Observer, and that is the flip side of this double song EP, Destroy, She Said. And then after that, I have another album called Time Machine. I'm a workaholic, so I've got too much stuff coming. A documentary I'm working on. These things will be announced in my social media as they become available.
So if you want to hear The Observer, and you're watching this on YouTube, the best way to hear it will be to download the audio version of this podcast, because we'll put it on there and avoid the endless copyright strikes that happen on YouTube.
Right.
So it's a lot easier to put that in the audio version, but the audio version's available all over the place. It's on every podcast platform. You can get it.
Right. And then I should add too that really all of these things, my literary work, my musical work, my film work, all of it is part of my spiritual teaching. And I do directly 3 days a week teach a select group of students. And this Oasis project is part of my spiritual work in that I am opposing untruth. And that is the nature of spiritual work. So unfortunately, this ideological idiocy is one of the main obstacles we have to confront. It's a kind of addiction and an obscuration to reality. So that's the center of my work, and all the other things radiate out of that.
Excellent. Well, it's always a pleasure, and I'm sure we'll have you back on soon, hopefully sooner rather than later this time.
Okay.
Yeah, but thanks a lot, and see you soon.
We just covered the tip of the iceberg, but I think we've gotten into some deep areas that have not been sufficiently explored. So thank you for having me. And we will certainly have, as the world becomes more insane, we will definitely have plenty of fodder to discuss in the future.
Brilliant. Well, thanks a lot.
Okay. My blessings to all of you. Thank you for watching, and see you soon.